They're going to go into great detail on what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to set the stage and talk to you about the overall vision and the overall capabilities that Cisco offers in cloud. And with that, a recent statistic that I learned about, it was actually a study done a little under a year ago by the ISA-CA, the Information Systems Automation and Control Association. Perhaps you've heard of them. They focus on security in information systems, amongst other things. And they found, they undertook a survey, and they found amongst the people who responded, which were their members, about 45% felt that the security risks of cloud outweighed the benefits. Everything we hear about cloud, the total cost of ownership reduction, the efficiencies, the pay-as-you-go, the self-service, everything that makes cloud so great. 45% of the people feel that, well, that is nice, but the security risks are too great. 38% felt they were about equal. The benefits, the risks about equal, and 17% that the benefits outweighed the security risks. But still, that is a huge barrier to adoption. And that's why, from a Cisco perspective, one of the core things we focus on is confidence. Confidence, we believe, is key to cloud adoption. And from our perspective, confidence breaks down into 4 areas. Security, being able to trust that as your information goes from a closed, you manage it, you know where it is at all times, it's within your physical infrastructure, to one where perhaps it's in a public cloud environment, a community, somewhere in between, that you can trust that the infrastructure is protecting your information. So security is a huge factor when it comes to confidence. Control. Who is accessing your information? What are they doing with it? Who can create? Who can destroy? Who can change rights to it? Compliance. Depending on the country or the government, there will be different regulations governing the use of cloud. In the US, certainly SOX, HIPAA, PCI, these various standards require controls around how information is handled. In other countries, they may have restrictions such that if you're in a governmental organization, information cannot leave the national borders. So in building this confidence in the cloud infrastructure, how do you ensure that it is acceding to the requirements, the regulations you have? And finally, service level management. And I think this is one of the most important things from a user perspective. Because as we disaggregate our information, we move it into different cloud models. We use different services located in different places. We want to preserve the end user experience. If users feel like, wow, it used to be so responsive when I would enter a customer record into a CRM database, or when I would set up a session for a conference with somebody, and now it's slow, it's laggy, I can't access it like I used to. I used to be able to access it remotely, but now I can only access it from the office. Service level management guarantees the experience. So having all of this is the foundation to what we see as cloud and to overcoming those barriers where people say the security risks outweigh the benefits of cloud. When we consider IT infrastructure today, there are a lot of things about it that give us that confidence. We trust the infrastructure because, for the most part, we built it. We installed these servers. We know where they're physically located. We have a degree of control over this infrastructure. We can engineer it to be as reliable as we need, and, of course, secure it. This is what we're accustomed to in the infrastructure today and why we have confidence in it. But then we look at the benefits of cloud, and we recognize that, yes, it will help us save money. It'll allow us to provision services more flexibly so that as demand changes, as user requirements change, there's a level of agility in the infrastructure that can help adapt to the business requirements. All of these efficiencies and capabilities are what attract us to cloud. And there's tension between these two worlds. There's a lot of uncertainty. So we believe the foundation to bring the best of both worlds can be found in the network. That all of the trust and confidence we have in the infrastructure on one side and all the benefits from migrating to cloud can be addressed in an infrastructure that can bring the security, control, compliance, and service level management required to give us confidence in cloud. This is Cisco's fundamental value proposition and position on this. that because clouds are effectively a disaggregation of the IT infrastructure, not just an abstraction of the underlying infrastructure, but moving services to different locations. And the thing that binds them all, that brings them all together, is the network infrastructure. So there are many clouds. To think of cloud is convenient, but really there are and there will be many clouds going forward. We can say that we're developing our own internal IT services to be more cloud-like, so that when we deploy IT within our organization, we're doing it based on virtualization, automation, and the flexibility for users to easily select and consume IT services. And then we may choose to add some services from a public cloud to complement or to outsource some of the services we provide. Or we may have a community cloud arrangement. The thing that's common to all of these different clouds is the network infrastructure, that fabric that can help us assure the security, the compliance, the control, and service level management. And so what do we get when we have a cloud that is essentially linked by that network fabric? We have a place where we can implement common, pervasive security, risk management, and policy control services. So as information moves around, as users access from different locations to different cloud resources, a common location. To be able to support application mobility, because again, we may have applications and services we run internally, we choose to move to the cloud, we choose to abstract and have hosted as a cloud service from a SaaS provider. Whatever we do, being able to move this around in a flexible way is the goal of cloud, and the network has a role to play in making that efficient. And these are all things, these are not just really, like words on a slide. These are things that are meaningful, and you'll see how we talk about this and how the infrastructure, the network infrastructure, delivers these capabilities. Obviously, with resiliency and disaster recovery, the network, again, can help with that. And anywhere connectivity. Again, it's not just the services that are being moved into different locations and being turned into a cloud-oriented service, but it's the users who are no longer in a fixed location. I mean, this is something that is a revolution that happened a while ago. Working from home, mobile working, virtualization in the user environment. But this environment also has to connect with the cloud, which means that much of the control is outside of the organization. If the cloud is outside and the user is outside, how do you extend corporate policy, controls, security, service level management, everything to that kind of externalized environment? Bandwidth is necessary for the user experience, and again, service level management. We see cloud also as a journey. And I think this is something that is well understood within the industry, because it's an evolution of capabilities, changing IT infrastructure to become more of a service delivery capability, changing the way you consume IT. But it doesn't necessarily happen overnight. There are stages that your infrastructure needs to move through to be able to deliver it internally and prepare you for, let's say, a more flexible infrastructure in general. The first thing is, of course, consolidation. This is a well-worn path that many customers follow. We're not saying that everybody has to go through each of these stages, but these are the general patterns we see. Consolidation is about bringing a disparate physical infrastructure under control, whether it's about consolidating data centers, reducing the number of physical servers, but bringing it to a level of rationalization to where you know what applications you have, what the service level requirements of those applications are, and where they're stored, who's using them, who's accessing them. That's necessary, because if you're going to service enable things, you have to have control over what your service portfolio is, and that's where consolidation starts. Then we move into virtualization. Let's abstract the services from the underlying hardware that delivers them. And that becomes about how we can make this a service-enabled infrastructure. Give us the flexibility to run multiple services on common hardware and save on the cost of infrastructure and management. The next key piece to build into the infrastructure, and again, this is not necessarily saying these have to be sequenced exactly like these, but they are key milestones, is automation and orchestration. Our infrastructure is consolidated, we have a degree of virtualization, but a cloud is about orchestrating many different IT capabilities as a common service or as a common utility. To be able to accomplish that, we need something that can talk to the different pieces of IT and organize and focus them to deliver a service that's consistent for an end user. If we think about delivering an end user a web server, there are many things that have to be configured in order to do that. There has to be a server, physical server provisioned. There has to be memory, disk space. There has to be an operating system. There have to be appropriate network policies, which deal with QoS, security, et cetera, so on and so forth. In order to pull all of these different elements together, orchestration is key. From this, now we can look at how we consume these services. Do we consume them for ourselves, by ourselves, in the model of a private cloud? Do we look to work with other agencies to say, we have a common interest in certain services, so let's make one of us the deliverer of the services and the rest of us the consumers, but we're building this just for our purpose? Or do we go to a full cloud model, where we trust somebody else who provides a service to the public, that they do a good enough job with it, it has the features we need, and the cost is right, and so we're going to consume it entirely from the cloud? Or do we find something in between, a hybrid cloud? All of these models are enabled certainly by the technology infrastructure, moving through the consolidation versus virtualization and automation. But it's also enabled by the processes in our IT organization, the way our business is set up, our strategy. And I think that in many ways is the most complicated aspect of cloud. It's not what is the technology to do it, but how do you run it as a service, and how do you run it in a way that benefits your business and deals with the security, control, compliance, and service level management requirements you have. A question that people often ask is, okay, so I understand the journey to the cloud a bit. I understand that I really need an infrastructure that's going to give me the level of confidence in being able to take that journey. But where do I start? How do I begin beyond simply consolidation, virtualization? Very often it comes down to what applications or services are appropriate for the cloud. And there's no hard, fast rule at this point. I mean, a lot of ideas are developing. You can look around to people in your industry who are undertaking this journey and look at what they're doing. In various government agencies, we see a lot of people outsourcing things like email, like collaboration, such as SharePoint. But one thing that we have found, a good starting place, is to look at applications that are non-core. And by core, I mean essential and perhaps unique to your business. So if your business is postal services, if you're a postal agency, then the application you use to manage package delivery and address information may not be the right thing for a cloud to begin with, but perhaps something along the lines of email services or voice services, things that are common to many people. Also, applications that tend to be dynamic are very good for the cloud. When it's difficult to predict over time what the IT requirements are, maybe if you're like a revenue services agency, you may have times of year when the IT needs go up. You need more processing power, more disk storage. That's a good candidate for the cloud because the cloud is designed to facilitate that type of flexibility. So these are just some examples we've seen from other public sector and industry people in general, the types of applications they move to the cloud. This is not exhaustive, and there are there's a lot of guidance out there, and there are a lot of lists out there, but what's common to them all is start with the things that are easy and that are IT generic, as we would say. So with all of this, what is Cisco's strategy for the cloud? What do we provide in delivering the confidence in an infrastructure that can embrace the different aspects of cloud, the complexity, and the opportunities? Cisco's cloud strategy boils down to 3 core pillars. First, delivering the essential infrastructure to build the cloud platform. Second, to work with industry specialists and organizations who deliver a piece of the cloud puzzle to integrate a full solution for cloud. So there are many organizations out there who have a piece of the pie. It's not just a full cloud stack, so to speak. You have virtualization technologies, VMware, Microsoft, Citrix. You have management capabilities, BMC, storage, servers, all sorts of people working together. The idea is we need to tie these things together into a cohesive service. And Cisco is very actively engaged in working with these different organizations and standards bodies to drive a common capability. And finally, to deliver services that drive cloud adoption, services that run over the cloud and make exceptional use of this cloud infrastructure. And so everything I talk about from here on out is going to be covered in more detail. This is the stage that I'm setting for my colleagues who will follow me. When I talk about cloud infrastructure, it's actually more than what you might just think in terms of physical devices. Physical devices, platforms, are certainly the starting point. And when I talk about platforms, I'm referring to compute, network, and storage, the basic ingredients that we need to build this environment. When it comes to network, Cisco, of course, has been working and innovating in this environment for a long time. Not just routers and switches, but within the past years, data center capabilities. How many people have heard of Cisco's Nexus line of products? May I see a show of hands? That's good news. Okay, no. The reason you've heard of it, of course, is because it is an exceptional product for the data center. This is one of the areas where we've undertaken a lot of innovation, where we focused on solutions that scale with lots of high bandwidth ports that provide the type of flexibility in this type of data center environment, and bringing a level of virtualization to the network infrastructure that we've also seen in the software and the hardware, compute infrastructure. I have colleagues who are going to go into detail about the Nexus platform, but this is one of the key capabilities that has gone from the innovation in the data center to innovating with cloud-capable technologies throughout the network environment, in our routers, in our switches, and you'll see a great example in just a moment. From the compute standpoint, Cisco entered the server market quite a while ago with our unified compute system. And for us, the UCS was a complete rewrite or a complete rethink about what a server should be. Not just looking at the legacy of how we got here. Well, we've been taking servers and we've been making them smaller, stacking them in racks, and trying to get as few racks as we possibly can. But instead, taking it from the standpoint of how do we enable a massively virtual environment with a wire-once approach that converges the network, the storage, and the compute infrastructure as much as possible. And that's what UCS was about, taking that approach. And as I say, I have colleagues who are going to go into detail on this. And then finally, when it comes to storage, we don't manufacture storage, but we do work very closely with leaders in the industry. So EMC, NetApp, for example. And so we focus on tying this common platform infrastructure together to serve as the foundation for the essential infrastructure. Now, why is this important? Because in many ways, people say, well, cloud is about abstracting the physical infrastructure. So I don't care about the physical infrastructure. I care about the services. I think that would be a mistake to take that approach. I think it's not that you don't care. It's that you're not focused as much on how the infrastructure is delivered, but you are focused on what it delivers. So for example, depending on the infrastructure you build as the underlying platform, it will affect the shape of your cloud. So with an infrastructure, for example, based on Cisco's capabilities, we can create a processing power that gives you 50% more servers, 4 times the number of virtual machines, 40% less cabling, 33% less power, reduction in CapEx, reduction in OpEx. Those become the fundamental economics for your cloud delivery. So, it's not that hardware doesn't matter, hardware is abstracted, but it's important how you build the hardware infrastructure because it affects the economics of your cloud delivery. But next, we build on top of that. So that's the hardware infrastructure. Services are the capabilities this infrastructure can provide on an end-to-end basis. And we divide the services into 3 general categories: security services, virtualization, and optimization services. There are a lot of services in here, so I'm not going to go into each of them individually, but just to give you an example. In the security services, we have virtual firewalls. Firewalls that will run on the compute platform and provide the same level of security control policy you get with our firewalls in the network, the ASA products, but in the virtual environment, between virtual machines. So you extend that level of control into the virtual network. Another capability is about providing end-to-end pervasive security. Because remember, I mentioned that this cloud environment is about taking our services and disaggregating them, moving them to different environments, using different people's infrastructure. How do you maintain security on an end-to-end basis? One of my favorite things that we offer, one of my favorite things to talk about, is an architecture we have called TrustSec. And I'm going to take just a moment to digress and point this out because I think it's a fundamental, important component to how we approach security in this environment, that it needs to be pervasive and it needs to be end-to-end. So consider, you go to a building, maybe of a company you're visiting, and you enter the building and there's a reception desk there. And at the reception desk, a guard perhaps stops you and says, "Who are you? Who are you here to see?" You give them your name, some form of identity, and then they figure out if you're in the database. Are you allowed in the building? Are you really here to meet somebody? And then they maybe check what you have on you. Have you got a laptop? Have you got a camera? What's allowed inside the building? What's not, so you don't do any damage to the property. After that, they give you a badge. And this badge essentially represents your clearance into the building. It says you're a visitor, or you're a contractor, or you're an employee, and that governs what you can do inside the building. You try to go to a room where you're not permitted access, use the badge to open it, you can't get in. That is TrustSec. TrustSec is you connect your laptop to the infrastructure or your device, whatever it is, your device. Connect it to the corporate network, virtually over a VPN or through a hotspot, doesn't matter. When you try to enter the trusted corporate environment, the building, you're checked. What's your identity? What do you have with you? What software are you running? Has it run an antivirus lately? All of the things that give you a compliance check. Based on that, you're assigned an ID tag. And that tag is literally put on every packet you send into the infrastructure. And that packet is used to assess your rights in the infrastructure. So you send traffic destined towards a particular server in a data center. The router, the firewall, the device sitting in front of that server or running virtually on the server looks at the tag on the packet and says, this person is a visitor, this person is an employee. Are they allowed access to this server? Are they allowed to, what are they allowed access to on the server? And it's enforced at the edge point like that. It's very scalable and it's end-to-end. It means that you don't necessarily have to worry about all of the intermediate steps. You just worry about controlling what people have access to based on that tag. And you'll see in a moment how this helps us deal with the problem of the explosion of information into the cloud and creating a virtual perimeter where essentially we leverage identity as the perimeter for security in the cloud environment. When it comes to virtualization in the cloud environment, virtualization services, there are a number of innovative technologies that we've been driving into standards in order to enable the flexibility of the data center and cloud environment. Capabilities such as Fabric Path, which my colleagues will talk about in detail, where essentially you can transform the data center into an entire layer 2 domain, not having to worry about the scalability limitations of layer 2, while benefiting from the ability to move virtual machines and workloads anywhere in the data center. Or with technologies such as OTV, overlay transport virtualization, being able to move workloads to any data center anywhere in the world, wherever you have different data centers, which allows you to deal with disaster recovery, backup planning, and do this again in a way that is seamless to the virtualization layer, that you don't have to change IP addresses and worry too much about network policy as you move things around, because the network takes care of it. And then optimization technologies, such as locator ID separator protocol. Has anybody here heard of Lisp? Okay, a couple of, you don't count, you're a Cisco employee. The locator identity separator protocol, again, will be covered in a little bit more detail, but it addresses the problem of, as you move workloads around, how do you make sure that people can access them? Sure, I move a workload, a server, a virtual server running in my environment to Amazon or to another data center. But the user trying to access that server doesn't know that that server has moved. So Lisp is a technology that essentially offers a back-end control plane to redirect traffic from users to the destination servers transparently in a manner transparent. And again, this is an innovation in the network that it provides. So all of this is just a list of ingredients without a recipe to put it together. And the final layer in this cloud infrastructure, this essential platform that I've been talking about, is the architecture. And this is something where Cisco, again, has been working for a long time. We have a number of different architectures which guide you in developing and deploying and optimizing a cloud environment. One of them I mentioned up here, it's called SMT, Secure Multi-Tenancy Architecture. We have another one called VMDC, Virtual Multi-Tenant Data Center. But these architectures are essentially focused on helping you take the platform ingredients, the service ingredients, also the third-party ecosystem capabilities, BMC, VMware, Citrix, NetApp, et cetera, and so on, and showing you how they can be integrated in a way that delivers a cloud service. So from the bottom of the stack up to the recipe, how do we put it together? That is what we consider to be the essential cloud infrastructure. When you put it all together, we call that in many ways the net-centric cloud. And this is the building block for the services that run on top of this. For the hypervisor layer, whether it's from VMware, Microsoft, Citrix, applications, SAP, optimized to run in this environment, and the automation and orchestration environment. This is the layer that rides on top of that. And as I said, the shape and the strength of that foundation is where you get your security, your control, your compliance, and your service level management, but it affects the economics of the upper layer. But Cisco also has built capabilities in this stack. We certainly work with and integrate very well with the industry players out there, BMC, et cetera. But over time, we've also been building a stack that integrates vertically to what we would describe as Cisco's cloud stack. And there are three fundamental components in this stack. We have network automation through a capability known as Overdrive. This is about configuring in an automated, service-oriented way network and machine components. Title, or Cisco Enterprise Orchestrator, which is an orchestration capability. And then recently acquired NewScale. If you've heard of NewScale, they were an industry and are an industry-leading company for user portals and service catalogs. We acquired them a little while ago, and they've helped to complete Cisco's cloud stack. So to give you an idea of what it looks like when we put together this stack and how this delivers a cloud service, we can look at it from this perspective. We have the essential infrastructure, which I've referred to already, the compute, the network storage, the OS, the virtualization. Now, one thing that goes along with that is, I mentioned, we take the perspective that there are many clouds, not just one cloud, but you'll be moving workloads and you'll use hybrid models going into the future. How do you manage that environment? Because traditionally, your infrastructure is the boundary to your control. Wherever your routing devices are, that is the edge of your control. When you move into the cloud, the only thing you have control over effectively is whatever service is in the cloud, a virtual machine running on an infrastructure as a service platform, or a SaaS service where you configure user accounts. But beyond that, you don't have the fundamental control that I talked about that gives us confidence. So how can we do that? One of the innovations that Cisco has been working on and will be available, I believe, June 2012, is a virtual router capability. Imagine being able to take routing, which is in many ways the control layer of this infrastructure, and embed it into any cloud platform out there. So that now the boundaries of your control of your network are no longer limited to the physical boundaries of your premises, but now extend into the cloud. So you can have a virtual router running in a cloud, sitting in front of your virtual machines, where you can configure VPN services, where you can configure QoS, other policy services, and extend the route control plane of your network infrastructure into the cloud. Think in this environment, that TrustSec model I mentioned before, about having a security tag that decides who can access what and where. Now you extend that security tag concept, TrustSec, right into the cloud. That's the level of control we're talking about here. So building on this infrastructure, as I mentioned, automation, Overdrive, turns the network into essentially automated service components so that these can be configured as part of a cloud service. Building on top of that, our title orchestration software. which works with our server technology, works with Overdrive to coordinate the cloud environment. And then finally, NewScale works on top of this infrastructure to both allow IT to create and populate a service catalog, so you can define services such as being able to configure a network priority for a class of users like gold, silver, or bronze access to the network, to being able to order and request a certain server with a certain operating system, and then have that delivered, implemented by the network infrastructure, billing and monitoring integrated so that you can have chargeback in other facilities. So a complete stack with, as I mentioned, because this is integrated at the network layer, services are riding on top of an end-to-end infrastructure, the security to give you the confidence in the cloud there. So in addition to the essential infrastructure, we've helped to accelerate deployment of this infrastructure. And one of my colleagues will be talking about this, a company that is a joint collaboration between Cisco, VMware, and EMC. We have taken the best of the infrastructure and pre-integrated it into blocks. And the idea here is to scale and accelerate the deployment of cloud infrastructure by making it easier to put in place that baseline platform. And what we deliver in this is pre-integrated network compute virtualization stacks, so that you can order stacks according to your requirements. Let's say the number of virtual machines you need to run, the types of services you're going to host, and not worry about the integration. All of this is supported by one company, VCE. So if there's a problem with the UCS component in here, Cisco's compute system, a network access, the storage, VMware, there's one company you deal with, VCE, rather than Cisco, VMware, and EMC. So this is a way to accelerate adoption of that fundamental infrastructure. But on top of this infrastructure, as I mentioned, Cisco has a number of application services that run. This is the third aspect of the pillar. We had the essential infrastructure, the ecosystem of services to deliver a full solution, and then actual applications and services. And there are three categories of these. Hosted collaboration, which my colleagues will talk about in more detail, but the ability to provide collaboration as a service, voice, video, telepresence, conferencing, instant message in a multi-tenant environment. Virtual desktop environments, that's a great use of the cloud. Virtualizing desktops and running them in the cloud. But we have a solution that focuses on optimizing that experience so that the user doesn't feel like, oh, my desktop's been virtualized. Now I'm a second-class citizen because when I play video, it's choppy, or voice doesn't sound so good. My experience is not good. Colleague's going to talk about this. And then finally, enterprise social capabilities. We have a capability known as show and share, which you can think of as a corporate YouTube, and a capability known as Quad, which you can think of as a corporate Facebook. So all of these are technologies that leverage this essential infrastructure, build on top of the cloud services that Cisco helps to deliver to drive that cloud experience. I'm going to skip over this, but this was just a slide because I'm running short on time. This was just a slide to quickly show you the effect Cisco has had internally in adopting cloud. The short story is we have our own private cloud infrastructure, and by virtualizing, leveraging UCS, doing automation, and all of those sorts of things, we've been able to halve the total cost of ownership of our servers on a quarterly basis, as well as go from you want a server and a service, it'll take 6 to 8 weeks, to it'll take 15 minutes and your department will be built. So this has been Cisco's experience. The final piece to this puzzle here, and what I'm going to conclude on, is the services to help you get there. Because I think one of the things that I've introduced here is that it's not a straightforward answer. How do I move to cloud? There are a number of paths, there are a lot of considerations, and it depends upon the business and the model you're trying to achieve. So Cisco can help and assist on that journey. Whether it comes to, at the very beginning, considering what should my cloud strategy be. That's where I've worked with customers, especially in the G-Cloud environment. What is the approach that should be undertaken in order to make the best use of cloud? And what role does IT play in that, especially the network? When we then consider going about doing this, how do we best plan and design the cloud? How do we provision the infrastructure in the right way? And how do we optimize it over time? There are a range of services that draw on Cisco's experience, our work with customers, and our work internally, Cisco on Cisco, in doing this, that we can bring to bear to help guide you through this different journey here. So to reiterate, to us, the fundamental value proposition here is helping to build confidence in cloud. And we believe that the network infrastructure is the key point to instill that, with the core platform services, the essential infrastructure, with the ecosystem solutions, and finally, with the services that help to drive adoption on cloud. Are there any questions? Good. The picture is set, the stage is set, and like I said, everything I've talked about here, each of my colleagues will go into detail, talking about the servers, the orchestration software, et cetera.
Great. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you.
If you have more questions for Josh, you can see him later. Thank you.